Colts fans are in shambles right now, respectfully. They're talking about firing Chris Ballard. They're talking about how this has been a colossal F up. And I tend to say sometimes fan bases can overreact. But I think that they're pretty spot on with this. I think that somebody has to answer for this. Is it Chris Ballard? Is it Shane Steichen? I have no idea. But Parker, I want to get your thoughts. Who do you think is to blame for the Colts collapse? This is a team that had everything in front of them. They had everything in front of them. And they just found a way to squander it away. You lose in a game that was a must-win to the Giants in New York, and the Giants have never won a home game this season. Makes matters worse, you lost to Drew Lock. You made Drew Lock. You made all Malik Wright's pre-draft talk about Drew Lock being a franchise quarterback correct. You made me look great. I want to get your thoughts on him. What do you think about the Colts, this collapse? Who's to blame? Park, what say you?
I do wonder, because the Colts for the last few years have had a very specific off-season team building model, right? They've brought in, they've been taking swings on these guys that have extremely highly rated athletic profiles. They've been getting the guys that kind of check the measurement and testing boxes, right? That's what they've cared about. And they said, hey, we'll bring these guys in even if they are raw, and we'll develop these guys into NFL players and we'll maximize their upside, because with these athletic profiles, with these frames, with the explosive plays we've been able to see on tape, XYZ, et cetera, we can make these guys into quality NFL football players. And what's happened, in my opinion, is that just hasn't worked. Like they've had a couple hits, they've had a couple flashes in the pan, but it's not something that they've been able to do and make a consistent force for their team. And so then when you get to Sundays, you just have all these guys that everything hasn't necessarily come together. And I think Anthony Richardson is kind of the epitome of what all of those different players on their team have been, where it's, they get out there, they can have great games, here and there, but they're not putting together consistent performances, and they're easily found out because they're just not well developed enough to have more of the complex, nuances that these other teams are able to roll out on Sundays. And so when teams are able to figure you out, there's only so much you can do. And then you have, the quarterback battle situations that they've had, throughout the season, not necessarily a battle, but just kind of the weird ups and downs of that room. We've seen a little bit of Blakw. We've seen a little bit of AR. It's just, there's been a lot of weirdness going on with the Colts. And that's why I feel like this has all been self-inflicted. And I think it has to start from the top down if you're going to make changes. And the reason you make changes is because you don't believe in this process anymore. The reason you make changes is because you say, we need to change the direction of where this team is going and how we operate on a day-to-day, month-to-month, season-to-season, process. So we need to change that whole system up. And so if in that case, it'd have to go top down. It's not a head coach issue at that point. It's a GM problem. And I think it's more, this team is sadly enough kind of on their way back to resetting again, when they should be in a position with Anthony Richardson going into year 3 where they're starting to really catch their stride. So it's just kind of the classic example of, hey, we got a guy we thought was going to be our franchise guy. We put weapons around him that we liked, and it just didn't work.
I have a question for you. How much do you believe in Anthony Richardson?
I always said he was a boomer bust guy, and his biggest issue with me coming out was, will that style of play hold up? I had the same question with Josh Allen, and it's just, if you can't stay healthy and you're playing like that, your team wants to use you like that, it's not going to work. And that's where I think he's just kind of fallen off at this point. I don't know if it's redeemable with the Colts.
Yeah, I feel like they're in a spot where they have to play him. They have to see how the thing works. I mean, listen, the returns have been, ever since they reinserted him into the lineup, they've been positive, right? But the issue with Anthony Richardson is the durability for me. For me, it's the durability. It's obviously you want him to progress as a passer. Will that happen? We'll see in year 3. But I look at it and I say, hey, listen, you got to be out there for your team. One of the best abilities is availability. And if you're not available, then what are you doing? Right? It's too much, Joe Flacco for my liking. Right? And if you're the Colts, how do you approach this offseason? Do you say, hey, we need to bring Joe Flacco back, or we need to get another veteran quarterback in here that can win us games? Because we know, of course, our quarterback is going to miss games at some point, and that's a real thing. They have to essentially go about the process of we need to go add, another quarterback for the just in case factor. Hell, maybe the Colts would be in on Sam Darnold.
Maybe that's what I was about to say. It's like I almost wish the Colts were in a position where they could grab a guy like Sam Darnold, but then it's like if you grab a Sam Darnold, you're quitting on Anthony Richardson. In my opinion.
Yes,
he's got what 2 years left on his rookie deal if they take the option, or 3 years, I guess.
3 years,
into year 3. And so maybe you give Sam Darnold the 3-year extension. You have Wright AR out for 3 years, developing behind him, and you see what happens in that 5th year between the two quarterbacks if AR beats him out in the 5th year option or not. But then I don't know. That's where I think if you go with Sam Darnold, you've already made the changes, and the new staff, the new faces you brought in want Sam Darnold and are already out on Anthony Richardson. If you don't move on, I expect it's because you didn't really make changes up top. So that's where I think it goes for me.
Correct. I agree with you. I think for the Colts collapse on the season, I think Chris Ballard has to obviously wear a lot of blame. A lot of people thought that the Colts were going to make it this year. A lot of people thought that the Colts was going to be the year they took the next step forward. And in a lot of ways, they probably overachieved a little bit. But for Chris Ballard, I mean, it's just a crappy situation all around because somebody has to wear the brunt of the blame for how the season has turned out, especially down the stretch here.